Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachala Namaskaram. Today I'm going to start with a question that was sent by email. What Scott wrote was, I have been studying Ramana Maharshi et al. Within the Advaita Vedanta, and I have been practicing inquiry for a while now. Practicing who am I? What is the source of I? These questions do quiet still my thinking. At best I can rest in the silent awareness being on occasion. I have yet to realize the transcendent, the eternal, the unborn. The story of me, the narrator, just keeps returning in the inner space. At times I will repeat who am I like a mantra to beat back the thoughts. However, the narration returns. My question is, should I direct my inquiry as, what is the source of this narrator? The narrator is the ego, the personality I, the constant streaming of my story. Is it the same to ask the two questions, what is the source of I, and what is the source of the narration? Or should I just continue asking who am I? So that's the question that was asked. That is, we need to understand first what Bhagavan means by ātma-vicāra, self-investigation. Bhagavan didn't say, though it is recorded in such a way in some English books, Bhagavan didn't actually say, ask who am I? He said, investigate who am I? He didn't say, ask what is the source from which I have risen? He said, investigate the source from which I have risen. So there's a difference between asking and investigating. If Bhagavan gives us a book and says, investigate what is written in this book, we don't sit there asking ourselves what is written in this book. We open the book and look inside. In exactly the same way, when Bhagavan says, investigate who am I, we need to turn our attention back within to see what we actually are. So to understand what Bhagavan means by self-investigation, it's best to refer to his own words. In Nana, for example, in the 16th paragraph of Nana, he gives a very clear and simple definition of what he means by ātma-vicāra. Sada kalamum manate atma vil vetirapatakutan ātma-vicāram endrupaya. That means the name ātma-vicāra is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. When he said the name is for, that means what this name ātma-vicāra, what it refers to is only keeping the mind on ourselves. Keeping the mind on ourselves means keeping our attention on ourselves. So what the practice of ātma-vicāra is simply being self-attentive, attending to ourselves, not attending to anything other than ourselves. And of course, to understand what this means, we need to understand what is meant by ourself. So long as we take ourselves to be the body or the mind or any of these adjuncts or parties, we will be attending to the wrong thing. We are not this body, we are not any of the five sheaths. The five sheaths are the physical form of the body, the life that animates the body, what is called prana, the mind that operates within the body, the intellect or the will. All these together constitute what Bhagavan refers to collectively as body. We are not this body consisting of these five sheaths. We are that which is, these are all objects known by us. We are aware, we are the subject, the knower of these objects. So our aim is not to attend to any object, but only to attend to the subject. That is why sometimes Bhagavan advised to, if anything appears, investigate to whom it appears. To whom it appears means it appears obviously to ourselves. So investigating to whom it appears means turning our attention away from whatever appears back towards ourselves, the one to whom it appears. So to To put it very simply, ātma-vicāra means self-attentiveness. So Bhagavan wasn't, as I say, Bhagavan wasn't saying ask these questions. He was saying investigate. There's a big difference between asking and investigating. Unfortunately, the noun vichara and the verb, in Tamil, the verb is vichari, which means, which is the verb form of vichara. It can mean, in some contexts, it can mean inquire in the sense of ask. But in the context in which Bhagavan is using it, in the spiritual context, it doesn't mean inquire in the sense of ask, it means inquire in the sense of investigate. So ātma-vicāra is self-investigation. When he says, nāna endru vicārika vendum, that means it is necessary to investigate who am I, not it is necessary to ask who am I. Asking who am I, if we're doing it by lips, it's a vocal action. If we're doing it by mind, it's a mental action. Vichara is not an action, because action cannot reveal to us what we actually are. We can know what we actually are only by being what we actually are. And to be what we actually are, we need to attend to what we actually are. That is, Bhagavan, in verse 25 of Uludunapdu, and in so many other places, but verse 25 of Uludunapdu is a particularly clear example of this. Bhagavan explained that the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to anything other than itself, but to subside and dissolve back into its source by attending to itself. So all mental activity is a movement of our attention away from ourselves towards some other thing. So our aim is not to let our attention move away from ourselves, but to hold the attention on ourself alone. As Bhagavan said in that sentence of the 16th paragraph of Nana. There are several other places where Bhagavan gives a very clear definition of what he means by vichara. For example, in verse 19 of Upadesha Undiyar, he says, Nan endru erum idum edu, endru nada ul, nan tale saindidum undipara, jnana vicharam idundipara. What that means is, when one investigates within, what is the place from which one rises as I will die. This is jnana vichara. Jnana vichara means awareness investigation. It's another way of saying ātma-vicāra. Because the self that we are to investigate is this fundamental awareness I am. So when he says investigate the place where I rises, he's using the word place metaphorically. The place where I rises means the source from which I rise. What is the source from which we rise as ego? We rise as ego in waking and dream. We cease rising as ego, or we subside back into our source in sleep. So the source from which we have risen is what exists in the absence of ego. What exists in the absence of ego, as we know from our experience in sleep, is just our own being, the fundamental awareness I am. So investigating the place from which I rise means investigating ourself, this pure being I am. And he says here, he uses one other word, ulnada. Ulnada means when one inwardly investigates or when one investigates within. When Bhagavan talks about investigating within, turning within, in the context of vichara, what he means by within is back towards ourself. That is, everything other than ourself is outside ourself. What is within ourself is only ourself. So whenever Bhagavan talks about turning within or investigating within or inwardly investigating, he means turning our attention back towards ourselves. So this is a very clear, again, similar to that definition that he gives in Nana, but the name ātma-vicāra is only for always keeping our mind on ourselves. Here he gives a similar definition. Ātma-vicāra is investigating ourselves, the source from which we have risen as ego. In other words, it's investigating our own being. If we investigate ourselves keenly enough, this I, that means ego, will die. This is the true true meaning of vicāra. Likewise, in verse 29 of Uladunapadu, he says, Nanendru vayal nabiladu, al manatal, nan endru engu undum, ena nadale, nyana neriyam, andru idu, nan adu, endru unnal, tunayam, adu vichara mama. What that means is, Nanendru vayal nabiladu means not saying I by mouth. Vayal means by mouth, but vai also means by words. So it doesn't only mean we shouldn't say I vocally, it also implies we shouldn't be saying I even mentally. That is, even to say the word I is, even to think the word I is a mental activity. We shouldn't even give room for such mental activity. So not even saying the word I by word of mouth or of mind, al manatal, investigating. Al manatal means by an inward sinking mind. That means when the mind turns within, it sinks back within, it subsides. So al manatal, nan endru engu undum in a nadale. That means investigating where one rises as I. So investigating by an inward sinking mind where one rises as I, jnana neriyam. That alone is the path of jnana. And that's the first sentence. And then in the second sentence, he says, instead, thinking, I am not this, I am that, is an aid. But is it vicāra? Is it being investigation? That question, is it investigation, is a rhetorical question. It implies it is not. So saying I by mouth, or thinking I am not this body, I am that Brahman, even that's an aid, but it is not the actual vicāra. The actual vicāra, when he says jnana neri, the path of knowledge, that implies vicāra. So he's explaining here vicāra is investigating by an inward sinking mind, that if the mind had to turn within in order to sink within. So within a mind that is turned within and therefore by subsiding within, where one rises as I. Where we rise as I is from I here. Rising as I means rising as ego. Where we rise as ego is only from our own being, from what we actually are. So what this implies is investigating ourself, the source from which we've risen as ego, that alone is vicāra. So it is not a matter of asking questions. It's a matter of turning our entire attention within. Coming back to the questions, what Scott have written, or the specific questions, should I direct my inquiry as what is the source of this narrator? It's not a matter of asking what is the source of this narrator. It's a matter of directing our attention back to ourselves. We alone are the source from which we have risen as ego, who is, as you say, the narrator, the one who has a story to tell, the personality I. Another important thing, when you say the personality I, it's important to understand that there are not two I's, there's only one I. When this one I remains as it is, as pure being, that is what we actually are. When that one I rises as ego, it rises as ego by as a result of being conflated with adjuncts. So the pure I without any adjuncts, is what we actually are. The same I, mixed and conflated with adjuncts, as I am Scott, I am Michael, I am whoever, that is ego. So it's not that there are two I's, but there's only one I. When that one I is in its pure state, that is what we actually are. When it's mixed and conflated with adjuncts, as I am this person, I am this body, I am Scott or Michael or whoever, whatever the name may be, that is ego. That is, Scott is not ego, Michael is not ego. Ego is not the person. Ego is the I that takes this person to be itself. So it's not a separate I, it's the same I, but because of its mixture with adjuncts, we call it ego. So the nature of ego, there are two defining characteristics of ego. Firstly, as ego, we are always aware of ourselves as I am this body. Secondly, we, as a result of as a consequence of identifying ourselves with the name and form of this body, we consequently are aware of other forms. When we know ourselves as we actually are, we will not be aware of anything other than ourselves, because we alone are what actually exists. Everything, all this multiplicity that we now experience is just a mental fabrication. It is a creation of ego. As Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uludunapadu, and also in so many other places, but he says particularly clearly in verse 26 of Uludunapadu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. That is, ego is the subject. Everything else, all phenomena, are objects. But objects exist only in the view of the subject. So only when we rise as ego, identifying ourselves as a body, we become aware of the appearance, the semi-existence of other things. So long as we are looking outward, looking away from ourselves at the appearance of other things, we are ego. When we, the same I, turn back within to see what we actually are, no such thing as ego is there to be found, because what we actually are is only pure awareness. If we, if in the dim light of dusk, we mistake a snake to be a rope, the only way to get rid of that snake is to look at it very carefully. If we don't look at it carefully enough, it continues to appear to be a snake. If we look at it very carefully, we see, oh, it's not a snake, it's just a rope. Likewise, if we look very carefully at what now seems to be ego, we will see that it is not ego, it is just the pure being awareness, Satchit, I am. So that is why, whether we talk about it as attending to ego or attending to our own being, what we actually are, it makes no difference, because there's only one I to attend to. Now this I seems to be ego, just like the rope seems to be a snake. But if we look at the rope, the snake carefully enough, we see it's just a rope. Likewise, if we look at ego carefully enough, we see what we actually are. We see ourselves as the pure being awareness, Satchidananda. So these are all important points to understand in order to clarify what is the practice. It's not a matter of one eye looking for another eye. It's not this ego searching for some other eye called the real self. The real self is nothing but ego as what ego actually is. So ego, all we as ego have to do is to attend to ourselves. If we attend to ourselves, we thereby subside back into our own being, because we, as Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, he describes ego as a formless demon or formless phantom. It's formless because it's got no form of its own. And without having a form, it's also got no separate existence. It's only form that makes one thing seem to be different from another thing. So ego seems to be a separate thing only when it grasps form, when it takes a body to be I. So what he says about ego in verse 25 of ātma-vicāra is, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. It sought, it takes flight. What does he mean by that? When he says grasping form, it comes into existence. What is the form, the first form that ego grasps as soon as it rises? Simultaneous with its rising, with its coming into existence, it grasps the form of a body as I. We can see this, for example, from our experience in dream. As soon as we begin dreaming, as soon as we begin dreaming, we are aware of ourselves as a person in that dream world. So the ego rising and identifying itself as a person and projecting a world all happens simultaneously. What happens in dream, exactly the same thing happens in waking. So the rising of ego and the identification, and it's identifying itself as I am this body, is simultaneous. And as ego, we cannot stand for a moment, we cannot endure for a moment as ego without continuing to grasp this body as I. So throughout the waking and dream state, we always experience ourselves as I am this body. We may not be thinking the words I am this body, but our experience is, but we have this body. We are constantly referring to this body. And this body means not just the physical form of the body, but all the five sheaths, the mind, the intellect, and everything. We are constantly referring to these adjuncts as I, because we are mistaking them to be what we actually are. So grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. So the form it grasps, when it comes into existence and when it stands, it's the form of a body. That's a basic grasping. But having grasped the form of a body as itself, we don't stop with that. Our attention is going outwards, constantly grasping other forms. Grasping other forms means we're attending to them. We're grasping in our awareness. So Bhagavan says in the third sentence, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. That means the more we attend to anything other than ourselves, the more we are thereby feeding and nourishing this ego. So ego flourishes abundantly by grasping and feeding on form, by attending to things other than itself. Since it cannot stand for a moment without grasping form, if it leaves one form, it grasps another form. As he says, uruvittu urupatram, leaving form, it grasps form. But then the important point is, in the next sentence where he says, tedinar. Tedinar literally means if seeking. If seeking, it takes flight. So what does if seeking mean here? What it implies is, if we as ego seek our own reality, seek to know what we actually are. In other words, if we investigate ourselves to see who am I, we as ego will subside and dissolve back into our source. That's what he means by taking flight. So we seem to be ego only so long as we're attending to things other than ourselves. If we turn our attention back to ourselves to see what we actually are, we don't find any such thing as ego. Has anyone ever seen a thing called ego? No, ego is what we seem to be when we're attending to other things. When we attend to ourselves, there's no such thing as ego to be found. As he says in verse 17 of ātma-vicāra, if we investigate the form of the mind without forgetting, that means without allowing our attention to be diverted away towards anything else, we'll find there's no such thing as mind at all. This is the direct path. So investigating the form of the mind means investigating what is this mind? Who am I who now seem to be this mind? If we turn our attention back to ourselves, we will not find any such thing as mind or ego. We will find only our own being. So what is required is simply to try and turn our attention back to ourselves, which is actually very easy. The one thing that we all know very clearly is I am. So there's nothing easier than attending to ourselves. However, when we clearly understand what the practice is, that it's just a matter of attending to ourselves, then we come up to against the real difficulty, because why does ātma-vicāra seem to be so difficult, though it is actually so easy? It seems to be difficult because in order to attend to ourselves, we need to be willing to subside. We need to be willing to surrender ourselves. We need to be willing to give up our false identification completely and forever. If we are not willing to surrender ourselves completely here and now, we will resist turning within. We will resist attending to ourselves. So all the difficulty that we encounter in ātma-vicāra, once we've understood what ātma-vicāra is, that it's just a matter of attending to ourselves, it should then be very easy. It is very easy, but it seems difficult because of our reluctance to surrender ourselves completely. We are not yet willing to give up this false identification. So because of our reluctance to give up this false identification, we continue trying to grasp things other than ourselves. So people say, oh, when I try and sit and attend to myself, my mind keeps on going outwards. Yes, it will keep on going outward because that's the nature of the mind. But mind in this context means ego. But ego cannot survive for a moment without grasping things other than itself. So as ego, we're always trying to grasp other things. So when we turn our attention within and try to attend to ourself alone, we are going against the very nature of ourself as ego. But though it is attending to ourself and thereby being ourself is contrary to the nature of ego, it's not the nature of ego, it's our own real nature. Our own real nature is just to be. And by being ourselves, we are knowing ourselves, because there are not two selves, one self to know another. So as Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Upadesha being oneself alone is knowing oneself, because oneself is not, they're not two, oneself is devoid of two, that they're not two selves, one self to know another self. So it's a matter of just attending to ourselves and thereby allowing ourselves to subside back within. Because we have so much liking to attend to things other than ourselves, our liking to attend to other things are what are called Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya means objects or phenomena. So everything other than ourselves is a Vishaya. Vasana means inclination. So Vishaya vasana means inclination to seek happiness in and therefore attend to things other than ourselves. This is the very nature of ego. That is, the vasanas are not ego, but it is the nature of ego to have these Vishaya vasanas. So long as we have Vishaya vasanas, we will always be wanting to try and grasp other things because we're not yet ready to let go. So, but the only way to overcome these Vishaya vasanas, as Bhagavan explains very clearly in the 10th and 11th paragraphs of Nana, is by persevering in this practice of self-attentiveness. The more we attend to ourselves, the weaker the Vishaya vasanas will become. And the opposite of Vishaya vasanas is Sat vasana. Sat means being. So Sat vasana is the inclination or love to hold on to our own being and thereby to subside back into our being. So this practice is a very, very simple practice, very easy practice, but it's a subtle practice, and also it requires all-consuming love. We must be wholeheartedly willing to surrender ourselves completely. Because we are not yet ready to surrender ourselves completely, it seems to be difficult. So long as it seems to be difficult, we need to keep on trying. We shouldn't get disheartened by the difficulties we face. We just have to keep on trying. The more we attend to ourselves, the stronger the Sat vasana will become, and the weaker the Vishaya vasanas will become. And in this way, we slowly wean ourselves off our liking to go outwards, and we cultivate the love to go back within, to subside back into our own being, and thereby to be as we actually are. Scott, is that a clear answer to your question, or do you have any further questions to ask on this? Because this is such an important subject. I mean, this is what it's all about. Bhagavan's teachings are all about, all directing us back to this practice. Does it make sense what I said today? Your microphone is muted. You can...
Or you can send a chat message if you want, Scott. He says simply turning attention inward without thought.
To Sat.
To Sat.
Yes.
You're
yes.
getting it. Okay.
That is, our attention going outward is thought. So we don't have to worry about thoughts. If we turn our attention back to us, towards ourselves, we're automatically withdrawing our attention from everything else. So thoughts will subside automatically, simply by our attending to ourselves. That's why Bhagavan says in the 6th paragraph of Nana, he says, Etane erningal erinomena. However many thoughts arise, so what? As and when each thought rises, if we turn our attention back to ourselves, if we investigate to whom does this arise, and thereby turn our attention back towards ourselves, the thought that has risen will subside. So we shouldn't be concerned about thoughts. If we're concerned about thoughts, we are thinking about something where our attention is on something other than ourselves. Our aim is to attend only to our own being. So long as you're trying your best to attend to Sat, the thoughts will drop off of their own accord. But if we're trying to get rid of the thoughts, then our attention is on the thoughts. It's a self-defeating effort. So the only effective way to deal with thoughts in such a way that they are destroyed, but they never come back again, the only effective way is to ignore the thoughts, to attend to ourselves. Because whether thoughts appear or they disappear, we are always aware I am, we always exist. So the thoughts are not a problem. The problem is our liking to attend to the thoughts. So let us just ignore the thoughts, attend to ourselves. Exactly. Resting in awareness as awareness, just being that fundamental awareness I am. So long as we're aware of other things, that which is aware of other things is ego. But pure awareness that we actually are is the awareness I am. So Chris, have any other questions come in?
Yeah, plenty, but you were going to tackle Robert, weren't you?
Oh, yes.
Let's get that. How much of what was physical manifestation in brackets about Bhagavan is a model for us?
Right, okay, good question. Yes, Bhagavan's outward life was exemplary. Bhagavan's, the outward contact, we can learn a lot from the outward conduct of Bhagavan, how he conducted himself in the world. We can learn a lot from that. But one problem is most of us were born after Bhagavan left the body, so we never had the good fortune of seeing Bhagavan in physical form. Of course, there are lots of books with lots of stories, but we have to remember when we read stories about Bhagavan, each one of us see Bhagavan through our own colored glasses. When I first went to Ramana, it was in the mid-1970s. So at that time, there were still a lot of old devotees who had lived many years with Bhagavan. And sometimes I would hear a story from one old devotee. And if I mentioned that story, as I was told by one old devotee to someone else, they'll say, no, I was there at that time. It wasn't like that. It was like this. So sometimes there were certain incidents that happened but I heard different versions from different people who were all there at the time, because everyone sees the same thing through their own colored glasses. They interpret it in their own way, and they understand it in their own way. So when it comes to stories about Bhagavan, we have to take them with a pinch of salt, because none of us know Bhagavan. In order to know Bhagavan as he actually is, we need to know ourselves as we actually are. In other words, we need to lose ourselves completely in Bhagavan, then only we will know him. So long as we're knowing him through our mind, we are knowing him imperfectly. We are not knowing him as he actually is. But that's, so with that caution, but we shouldn't, we should always be, whatever stories we hear, we have to, as I say, we have to take with a pinch of salt. But from all the stories we read about Bhagavan, we all have a general picture of how Bhagavan lived his life. Maybe a more or less accurate picture, but we know more or less how Bhagavan was, how Bhagavan dealt with different situations, how he was completely detached, but at the same time was so kind and loving. I mean, it's hard to describe Bhagavan in words. No words can adequately describe him, but we get a general idea of how Bhagavan was. I remember once Swaminathanananda telling me that when we live our life in this world, a very good guide to how we should behave in this world, whenever we are, whatever situation we find ourselves in, if we think to ourselves, how would Bhagavan respond in this situation? That is a very good guide. Because Bhagavan didn't, there's so many things were happening around Bhagavan. Bhagavan never overreacted to any situation. Sometimes he would seem to act in a very firm way. Sometimes he'd seem to be completely indifferent. But one thing, he never overreacts. If he reacts, it's because for a purpose. So, of course, we can't know exactly how Bhagavan would act in each situation, but according to the best of our understanding, if we think how Bhagavan would act in this situation, supposing someone says something unkind to us and we're hurt, we may feel inclined to say something harsh back to them. But what would Bhagavan have done? He would have been indifferent to it. So we should be indifferent to it. In that way, if we think about how Bhagavan lived his life, that can be a very good guide to us in how we should live our life. Of course, we can never live exactly like Bhagavan, but it gives us some sort of guideline, some sort of benchmark, so judging our own behavior. Would Bhagavan have behaved like this? No, he wouldn't, so I shouldn't behave like this. So yes, so the question Robert asked is, how much of what was physical within bracket manifestation of Bhagavan is a model for us? Yes, Bhagavan's outward life is a model for us, at least to a certain extent, at least to the extent to which we can understand and appreciate how Bhagavan lived in this world. But of course, Bhagavan's teachings are not primarily about how we should behave in this world. Bhagavan's teachings are about turning within and subsiding back within. How we should behave in this world is, Bhagavan has given us some very good clues, particularly towards the end of Nana. What he says in the last few paragraphs of Nana, particularly paragraphs 19 and 20, he gives us some very good pointers how we should behave in this world. In paragraph 19, he starts by talking about minds. That is, this is particularly in the context of, we see so many people in this world. Some people seem to be good, some people seem to be bad. And most of us are just a mixture of good and bad. So, but what Bhagavan says here in this context is, there are not two minds, a good mind and a bad mind. Mind is only one. Only vasanas are of two kinds, namely subha and asubha. Vasanas means inclinations. inclination to behave in a certain, or inclinations or propensities, how we, all our actions of mind, speech, and body, we act on through mind, speech, and body under the sway of our vasanas. So vasanas are what determine how we behave. So Bhagavan says only vasanas are of two kinds, namely subha and asubha. Subha means agreeable, virtuous, or good. Asubha means disagreeable, wicked, harmful, or bad. So there are two types of vasanas. Of course, there's not just two types. This is a generalization. Some vasanas are more good, some vasanas are more bad, somewhere in between. But this is just a general classification of vasanas. Some we can generally say are good, some we can generally say are bad. And then he says, when the mind is under the sway of subha vasanas, it is said to be a good mind. And when it is under the sway of asubha vasanas, a bad mind. So when we see a person and we see their behavior is disagreeable behavior, we say, oh, this is a bad person. What it is, why they appear to be bad is because their mind is under the sway of asubha vasanas, and those asubha vasanas it's under the sway of those asubha vasanas that they're behaving in a disagreeable manner. If someone behaves in a very agreeable manner, if they're very kind and generous and sympathetic and patient and have all good qualities, that is because their mind is under the sway of subha vasanas. So it's not that ultimately, in the heart of all of us, it's the same self is shining, the same pure being I am is shining in the heart of all of us. But when we rise as ego, we come under the sway of our vasanas. And the vasanas determine how we behave in this world. If we allow ourselves to be swayed by good vasanas, we will behave well. If we allow ourselves to be swayed by bad vasanas, we'll behave badly. And all of us have a mixture of good and bad vasanas in us. So it's we who have to decide whether we allow ourselves to be swayed by the bad vasanas or by the good vasanas. Then Bhagavan goes on to say, however bad other people may appear to be, disliking them is not proper. It's not appropriate. And then he says, very beautiful sentence, likes and dislikes are both fit to dislike. That is, the problem is not other people's behavior. The problem is our own likes and dislikes. So if we should dislike anything, the only thing we should dislike is our likes and dislikes. In other words, our aim should be to be free of likes and dislikes. So he puts it very beautifully in Tamil. Pira evolog ketava galai tondrinum. However bad others may appear to be, avagalai verital ahadu. It is not appropriate to dislike them. Then he says, virupu verupugal irendum. Both likes and dislikes, verikatakana, are fit to be disliked. So what we should really dislike is our own likes and dislikes. If we could give up our own dislikes and likes and dislikes, we would not be disturbed by the bad behavior of others. Why the bad behavior of others upsets us? Because of our own likes and dislikes. So inwardly, we need to be free of likes and dislikes. And then he goes on to say, it is not appropriate to let one's mind dwell excessively on worldly matters. That is, the more we're thinking about the world, the more we're thinking about other people, how other people are behaving, what is all the terrible things that are happening in this world, the wars and the politics and all these things that are happening and all the injustices and everything. This is only agitating our own mind to no avail. So it's not appropriate to let our mind dwell on worldly matter, because if we're following Bhagavan's path, more and more we should be turning our attention within. So if we're upset hearing about the wars that are happening in the world, if we're upset by hearing about the behavior of certain politicians, certain world leaders and everything, who am I who are getting upset about this? We should be turning our attention back to ourselves, because we can't change the behavior of others. We can change our own behavior by turning within more and more. And then he says, to the extent possible, it is not appropriate to intrude in others' affairs. In other words, we shouldn't be interfering in other people's business. where our aim is to turn within and to subside within. And then he says, all that one gives to others, one is giving only to oneself. If one knew this truth, who indeed would remain without giving? So what Bhagavan says in this paragraph is indicating to us how he himself lived in this world. So yes, it is appropriate to think about how Bhagavan lived in this world, how Bhagavan was equally kind, both to good people and to bad people. Sometimes he would seem to show even more kindness to the bad people. Sometimes the good people he would seem to ignore because they don't need that, because if we're really following Bhagavan's path, we should be seeking him in our heart. So if he outwardly ignores us, we'll know it is because he's reminding us that he exists in our own heart. But to the people who aren't so good, he gives more attention to them, shows more kindness to them, because they're more in need of that outward grace in the outward form. We are to seek that grace within ourselves if we are truly following his path. But then the most important is the final paragraph of Nana. Here he really summarizes everything. How we should live in this world is expressed beautifully here. Firstly, he reminds us one of the fundamental principles of his teachings, which is what he also says in verse 26 of Valludhanapati, but here he says in slightly different words. In verse 26 of Valludhanapati, he says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. He says the same thing here, in other words. What he says here is, if oneself rises, everything rises. If oneself subsides, everything subsides. So oneself here, the self that rises is ego. So if we rise as ego, everything else will rise. Everything else comes into existence. If we subside back within, everything else will subside back within. So if we want to solve all the problems of the world, to set right all the injustices, put an end to all the wars, what do we have to do? We have to subside back into our own heart. Then in the next sentence, this is one of the most important sentences in Bhagavan's teachings, and he expresses it so beautifully. Evlo kevlo tandu nadikaromo, avalo kavlo nammayundu. What that means is, to whatever extent, sinking low, we behave, to that extent there is goodness. The key word here is tandu. Tandu means sinking low, sinking deep, subsiding, it implies being humble. So the more we subside within and behave accordingly, to that extent there is goodness. So for Bhagavan, the root of all evil is our rising as ego. The root of all good is our subsiding. These are two things. So the more we inwardly subside and live our life accordingly, to that extent there is goodness. So Bhagavan doesn't ask us to do good actions. All he asks us is to subside back within. If we subside within, our outward behavior will reflect that. So automatically we'll be doing good actions. So we don't have to worry about doing good actions. All we have to concern ourselves about is subsiding within. And then in the final sentence, he says, Manate adaki kondirandal enge irandalum irakalam. That means if one is continuously restraining the mind, wherever one may be, one may be. The word he uses for constraining is adaki. Adaki is a causal verb. It's a causative form of a verb that means to subside or cease. So to the extent to which we curb or subdue or prevent our mind rising, if we are always preventing our mind from rising, wherever we may be, one may be. Enge irandala means wherever one may be. Irakalam means one can be, in the sense of it is appropriate to be, it is proper to be. It can also mean let one be. So it has two meanings. One, to wherever one may be, or wherever one may be, let one be. And so it both amount to the same thing. So key point in Bhagavan's teaching is subduing ourself, ceasing to rise as ego. So that is what the primary lesson we have to learn from Bhagavan, how to subside more and more within. But Bhagavan exemplified that to the extent it is possible to exemplify it in his outward life. So if we consider how Bhagavan would behave in each situation and try to act accordingly, that is a good guide. Robert, is that a satisfactory answer to your question? Is that what you meant in your...
Yes, more than satisfactory, Michael. The only point that you touched on it towards the end that caused the question to arise, and that is his utter simplicity. I must say, you exhibit the same thing. He hardly wore any clothes.
Yeah.
And what he wore was, and he had a pot and a stick and what else?
Yeah.
It was that simplicity that didn't distract even the visual presentation. In other words, there wasn't any distraction from that inner turn. Yeah.
Yeah. And he lived a completely open life. We all need to some extent, we need some privacy. We need time for ourselves. We need space for ourselves. Bhagavan's life, he had no space for himself. He had no time for himself. He was open to whoever came at any time. He was always open. We may not be able to live by that, but that is the ideal. That is what we have to, as you say, so simple, so open, so kind and loving to all. Equally kind and loving to the good and to the bad.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, Michael, do you want the next one?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Are awareness and attention the same thing?
Yes, in a sense. That is attention is a focusing of our awareness. Attention is a function of ego or mind. That is, when we rise as ego, we are aware of the appearance of many things. So we can focus our awareness, so to speak, on one thing or another thing. So the attention is the directing or focusing of our attention towards one thing or one set of things in preference to other things. So essentially, that is, attention is nothing but awareness, but it's that awareness focused on something. But for pure awareness, there is no such thing as attention, because pure awareness is awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. So there's no, attention is a selective use of our awareness. When we're aware of many things, we can selectively choose to focus our awareness on one thing rather than another thing. So when we rise as ego in waking and dream, we're constantly using our attention. That's, we're focusing our awareness on one thing or another thing. In sleep, there's no attention in sleep because there's no ego there. So this attention is a very, very powerful instrument, because whatever we attend to, that thing will loom large in our mind. For example, some people have certain phobias. The more they dwell on that phobia, the bigger that phobia will become. Certain people have ambitions, desires. The more you focus on the object of your desire, the stronger that desire will become. So this attention is a very, very powerful instrument, because the power behind attention is what is called Chit Shakti, the power of awareness, the power of consciousness. And that is the supreme power. By this Chit Shakti, we have created all this world. By misusing the Chit Shakti, we've created all this world. By using that Chit Shakti, that power of awareness, correctly, we can put an end to all this. So how should we use this great power of attention? The wise way to use our power of attention, according to Bhagavan, is not to attend to anything other than ourselves, but to attend to ourselves alone. Because so long as we attend to anything other than ourselves, we are feeding and nourishing the the illusion, but we are ego, but we are a separate I who is identified with this body. The more we attend to ourselves, the more we as ego subside. And when we attend to ourselves keenly enough, ego will dissolve forever in its source, and everything else will dissolve along with it. So this attention is a very, very great power. So we should use our attention very, very wisely. The wisest use of our attention is to attend only to ourselves. Even when we're attending to other things, we should take care of what we attend to. As Bhagavan says in the 19th paragraph of Nana that I'm just reading, it is not appropriate to let our mind dwell excessively on worldly matters. Because the more we attend to the world, whether it's our own life in the world or the life of others, whatever, the more reality we are giving to these things, the more power we are giving to these things. So that is the more, if we allow ourselves to be preoccupied with something, that thing gets more and more power over our mind. So the wise use of our power of attention is to try to turn it within more and more and more. If we find we don't have sufficient love to attend to ourselves all the time, then the next best thing to attend to is Bhagavan and his teachings, because the more we dwell on his teachings, the more that his teachings are reminding us of the need for us to turn within. So that will encourage us to turn within more and more. But no amount of thinking about Bhagavan teachings is a substitute for the practice. Bhagavan teachings, dwelling on Bhagavan teachings are a great aid to the practice, but the purpose of dwelling on Bhagavan's teaching is to encourage us to put this into practice more and more. In other words, to practice attending only to ourselves. That is what it's all about. That is what Bhagavan's teachings are all about. So if we've really understood Bhagavan's teachings, we will understand what they're all pointing at is to attend to ourselves. So that is what we must try and do more and more. When we find we don't have sufficient love to attend to ourselves, we go back to his teachings to get more encouragement to go within more and more. I hope that is a clear answer to that question.
I had that question. I just,
yeah.
If that attention is totally on the I with no adjunct, I mean, that's just the total focus and it's on nothing else.
Then it ceases to be attention. It returns to its source, which is pure awareness.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks to Bhagavan, because this is just what Bhagavan has taught us. I'm just relaying what Bhagavan has said.
It's in that book, the Sadhu Om. It's right there. So thank you.
Yes, Sadhu Om puts it very beautifully in one place in Partha Sri Ramana. He says, attention is grace. The more we attend to anything, the more we are bestowing grace on that thing. So if we want to be,
thank you, sir. Thank you.
If we want to be a fit recipient for God's grace, we need to attend to ourselves, because God's grace flows through our own attention.
Thank you.
God's grace is that Chit Shakti, which is flowing through our attention.
Are you ready for the next one?
Yes.
Okay. When do we get to experience the peace and love and joy from practicing self-attention? When I try to pay attention to myself, I seem to have brief moments of success interrupted by thoughts rising again. Supposedly, these moments of success are when the ego has subsided, and so the I am alone remains. So I am either aware of trying to pay attention to myself, possibly with success, or my thoughts. Where is the peace and love and happiness I am seeking?
You yourself are the peace and happiness and love you are seeking. The more you attend to yourself, the more you subside. The more you subside, the more you will experience that peace and love and happiness that is your own real nature. So the thoughts appear because of the strength of our own inclinations to attend to things other than ourselves. In other words, our Vishaya vasanas. So in order to weaken our Vishaya vasanas and strengthen the Sat vasana, the love to turn within, we need to patiently persevere in this practice. No matter how many times our attention comes out towards other things. In other words, when we say thoughts appear, what does that mean? That means our attention has gone away from ourselves towards other things. So the appearance of thoughts is nothing but the diversion of our attention away from ourselves. So the more we attend, the more we direct our attention back to ourselves, the more the inclination to attend to other things will grow weaker, and the love to attend to ourselves will grow stronger. So we just have to persevere in this practice. If we are really following Bhagavan's path, because Bhagavan's path is a path of subsidence, to the extent to which we subside without rising with likes and dislikes and so on, we automatically experience more peace, more happiness, more love. I mean, it's just we experience peace, love, and happiness to the extent to which we as ego subside. Because peace, love, and happiness are our own real nature. So the more we subside, the closer we come to being what we actually are. So Bhagavan's path is the path of happiness. See how beautifully Bhagavan expressed it in that final sentence of the 13th paragraph of Nana, where he gives the analogy of a passenger on a train. He says, why to suffer? In kashtapadavendam, why to suffer carrying that luggage on our head instead of putting it aside and sukhamai? Sukhamai means happily traveling. So if we are ready to surrender ourselves completely, our life will be a very happy, blissful, peaceful, loving life. It's because of our reluctance to surrender ourselves, but we carry all these things on our head and we suffer accordingly. So the choice is ours. If we want to be free of suffering, we must be willing to surrender ourselves. In other words, we must be willing to subside back within. And we subside back within to the extent to which we attend to ourselves. So the proof of the pudding is in the eating. If we put Bhagavan's teachings into practice, we may not have, we haven't yet attained the ultimate aim, but we can see by the very practice itself reveals the truth of what Bhagavan is saying. The more we attend to ourselves, the more we subside. The more we subside, the more pleasant our life is. The more happy, peaceful, and loving our life is. I hope that's a clear answer to that question.
The answer is yes in chat.
Okay, good.
Right. So then the next one we've actually, right. In fact, this person has put two questions in a slightly sort of, with somebody else in between. I'll just give you the first part, shall I? And then
Yes.
go from there. Is it like Humphreys told in that letter, be in that who sees or who thinks, stay there?
Yes, that is, I think, if I remember, it's a long time since I've read it, I think what he recorded, Bhagavan said, don't attend to anything else. Don't see anything else. See the seer. Attend to the seer. Obviously, the seer is ego. But since ego is just a mask, what lies behind that mask is what we actually are. So attending to the seer means attending to ourselves. And to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego subside and our real nature shines forth. I hope that, as I say, I don't exactly remember what Bhagavan wrote. What F.H. Humphreys recorded about what Bhagavan said to him, but it was something to that effect. That we shouldn't take that to mean that the seer is what we actually are. The seer is what we seem to be when we rise as ego. But if we attend to the seer, we are in effect attending to what lies behind the reality behind the seer, in other words, our own self. If we look carefully at the snake, what we're actually looking at is the rope. And if we look at the snake carefully enough, we will see it's just a rope. Likewise, if we look at the seer carefully enough, we will see that what we actually are is not the seer, but just pure awareness. A light that illumines the seer, enabling the seer to know everything else.
Okay, so of course, actually a rope, we only label it as a rope because from our memory, we say that's a rope.
It's just an analogy, but just to illustrate the point. But why attending to ego will reveal our real nature? Because ego is our real nature, seeming to be something else. What is the difference between the snake and the rope? There's no difference in substance. They're the same thing. It's a difference in appearance. Likewise, the difference between ego and our real nature is just a difference in appearance. So if we look at ego carefully enough, we will see what we actually are.
Right, so then the next thing she says is, when I practice this, my breathing gets slow, enter some kind of peace.
Yes, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, the activity of the mind will thereby subside. When the activity of the mind subsides, the activity of the breathing will also subside along with it. But so long as we notice the slowing of the breath, our attention is on the breath rather than on ourselves. So let us not worry about the breath. It will happen automatically. To the extent to which we attend to ourselves, the mind will subside, and therefore breathing will also subside. But if we notice the slowing down of the breathing, then again our attention has slipped away from ourselves. So that is, we shouldn't even notice the slowing down of the breath, though it will certainly happen. That's what one of the things Bhagavan said. What's the secret behind pranayama? But the mind and the breath are closely connected. They both come from one source. So to the extent to which the breathing subsides, the mind will subside. And to the extent to which the mind subsides, the breathing will subside. But if we follow the path of pranayama, trying to control the breathing, we will thereby, if we take it far enough, we will end up in manolaya. That is a temporary subsidence of mind. So the mind will become still, but it's only a temporary state. That's why Bhagavan told this story of the yogi on the banks of the Ganga, who was so adept at his yoga practices, but he could easily go into nirvikalpa samadhi. And one day when he woke up from nirvikalpa samadhi, he was feeling thirsty. So he asked his disciple to fetch water. The Ganga was nearby, the river Ganga was nearby. So his disciple went to the river to fetch water. But by the time he came back, the yogi had again gone back into nirvikalpa samadhi. And this time he went into nirvikalpa samadhi so deeply that he remained in that state for 300 years. Within those 300 years, of course, his disciple passed away. The nearby village, the villagers had all passed away. The river itself had changed course. So now the river was several miles away. And because the river had moved, the village also moved. So 300 years later, when the yogi woke up, he was sitting in the middle of a jungle with no one around. But the first thing he did, he angrily asked, "Where's my water?" What Bhagavan said about that is, this story illustrates, but even the last thought that was in his mind before he went into samadhi was the first thought that came when he rose from samadhi. That means not even the most superficial thought is destroyed, no matter how long you remain in nirvikalpa samadhi, because nirvikalpa samadhi is only manolaya. Manolaya means a temporary dissolution of mind, like sleep. Our aim is manonasa. So Bhagavan says in the final sentence of the 8th paragraph of Nana, where he talks about pranayama, he says, therefore pranayama is an aid to restrain the mind, but will not bring about manonasa. Mano nasa means destruction of the mind, permanent dissolution of the mind, which is our aim. So in verse 13 of Uludunaptu, he draws this distinction. Sorry, verse 13 of Upadeshundya, he draws this distinction. He says, dissolution of mind is of two kinds, laya and nasa. That which is dissolved in laya will rise again. If its form dies, implying in nasa, it will not rise again. So our aim is not mano laya, but mano nasa. That's why Bhagavan never encouraged people to practice Nirvikalpa Samadhi, because you're not achieving anything. It's very nice to be in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. It's like it's nice to be asleep, but it's not, you're not making any spiritual progress in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So in verse 14 of Upadeshundya, Bhagavan says, if the mind but will subside by pranayama, only if that mind is sent on the vari will its form die. Vari has two meanings in Tamil. That is, or is a verb that means to investigate or know. So vari, it means the investigating path. In other words, a path of self-investigation. Or can also mean oru, one. So it can also mean the one path. But when he said the one path, what is the one path he's referring to? It's only the path of investigation. In Sanskrit, he says ekachintanat. Ekachintanat means by thought of the one. What is the one? In Advaita philosophy, the one is Brahman. Ekam eva advaityam, one only without a second. So when he talks about, some people take ekachintana to mean one thought, any one thought, the mind will die. No, what he means by ekachintana is by meditating on the one. That means on ourself alone. If we think of anything other than ourselves, then there's two. There's a subject and an object. So thinking of one must mean thinking of ourself alone. But only in the state of self-attentiveness is there one. So what he means by ekachintanat in Tamil, in Sanskrit, and orvari in Tamil is this path of self-investigation. So only if we turn our mind back within and send it on this path of self-investigation will it die. So pranayama is not a means to bring about mananasa. So though the mind and the breath are linked in that when one rises, the other rises. When one subsides, the other subsides. Our aim should be to bring about the permanent dissolution of mind. In other words, destruction of mind, manonasa. That can be achieved only by vichara. That's why he says, only if we send the mind on yorvari will its form die. I hope that is a clear answer to that question.
Right, next question. In day-to-day life, even if we want to stay close to I and don't want anything or have curtailed our own needs, the needs, expectations from those around us are still huge, clients, bosses, etc. And those needs keep pushing me away from the I and fully engaged in to this not completely real world, in inverted commas, for at least 5 days a week. What can I do about it?
That is, whatever you may be doing, whatever pressures there may be from outside, there is never a moment when you do not exist and when you are not aware of your existence. So even in the midst of all these activities that life demands of us, we can hold on to our own being if we have the liking to do so. This is where the practice comes in. It seems that when we're engaged in activity, we get distracted, we forget about ourselves. It's only by practice that we can learn to hold on to our being, even in the midst of all these activities. Because our being is always clearly shining as I am. There's never a moment when we're not aware of our being, but we overlook it because of the reality we give to all these external activities and the demands that are made on us. But we can do all those activities perfectly well while holding on to ourselves, because whatever actions we need to do, that is, action, there are three instruments of action: mind, speech, and body. There are two forces driving these actions. One is our own will. That is, under the sway of vasanas, we think certain thoughts, say certain words, and do certain actions. So most of the actions we do are under the sway of our vasanas. But there are certain actions that we have to do in order for our destiny to unfold. So those actions that are necessary for us to do in order for our destiny to unfold, as Bhagavan says in the first sentence of the note that he wrote for his mother, in accordance with our prarabdha, he who is for that, being there, meaning being in the heart of each one of us, will make us act. So Bhagavan, God, will make us do whatever actions of mind, speech, and body are required in order for our prarabdha to unfold. So we don't actually have to concern ourselves with action. If we hold on to our own being, our mind, speech, and body will be made to do whatever they're meant to do. So it's all a matter of how deep we go in the practice. At first, it seems that when demands are made on us, when we're doing other things, but we forget about ourselves. It'll naturally be like that at first. But the deeper we go in this practice, the more we will learn to hold on to our being, even in the midst of all these outward activity and outward demands made upon us. And then we will find those demands are not made upon us. They're made upon our mind, speech, and body. Let the mind, speech, and body do whatever they're meant to do in accordance with destiny. Our only duty is to hold on to our own being. So by holding on to our being, we are surrendering our mind, speech, and body to God. Let him make them do whatever they're meant to do. So we can slowly, by practice, we can slowly learn to detach ourselves from the body, speech, and mind that are doing whatever actions they have to do in accordance with destiny, whatever action they're made to do by Bhagavan in accordance with the destiny, and we remain resting in our own being. But that requires practice. It's not, this doesn't come to any of us without, we have to earn this. We have to earn it by patient and persistent practice. So whatever we may be doing, we should try as much as possible to attend to ourselves. It may seem easier sometimes when we are free of external demands and when we're not engaged in external activities. At first, that will seem easier. But the more we practice it, the more we will find that even in the midst of activities, even in the midst of all the external demands, we can be holding on to our own being. Because whatever we may be experiencing, who is experiencing it? I am. So the I am is always shining. We cannot experience anything without, first and foremost, the first experience, the foundation of all experiences is this fundamental awareness, I am. So that is what we need to hold on to. Let the activities happen as they're meant to happen. It's no concern of ours. The more we attend to ourselves, the more we will find that the actions of body, speech, and mind go on automatically, because Bhagavan is making them do whatever they're meant to do. So the more we hold on to our being, the less we rise as ego to do anything according to our own volition, our own under the sway of our vasanas. We act less and less under the sway of our vasanas. But still, whatever has to be done will be made to do. Mind, speech, and body will be made to do it. I hope that's a clear answer.
Okay. So next one. Now we are going in this path with the grace of Bhagavan, and I'm trying to subside and do ātma-vicāra as much as I could, and I naturally struggle, but I do believe that I need to be patient until Bhagavan pour more and more love, heart melting with love, so then I can achieve success. My meaning is I try to do ātma-vicāra as much as I could, but I also have faith that it will succeed when Bhagavan pour more love into me. Am I right?
Yes, yes. That is Bhagavan. Bhagavan's love is infinite. So Bhagavan always has infinite love for us. And that infinite love for us, but that he has for us, is what we experience as his grace. So grace is never lacking. But in order to avail ourselves of the ever available grace, we have to put it into practice. Bhagavan makes this very clear in the 12th paragraph of Nana. He says, God and Guru are in truth not different. Just as what is caught in the jaws of a tiger cannot escape. In other words, once a prey is caught in the jaws of a tiger, there's no way of escaping. Just like that, those who have been caught in the glance of Guru's grace will surely be saved and will never be forsaken by him. Bhagavan gives a very firm assurance with that. The words he used in Tamil are very emphatic. Orukalum kaivida, even one time he will not abandon, and he will certainly save us. But he adds an important proviso at the end. Eninum Guru Kartia Varipadi Tavaradu Nadikabendum. Nevertheless, it is necessary to follow without fail in accordance with the path shown by Guru. So we have to do our bit, trying our best to turn within. Because, as Bhagavan says, grace is not something external to us. Grace is not something up in heaven that's going to descend down upon us. Grace is our own reality. Grace is always shining in our heart as eye. So grace works through us. So whatever effort we make to turn within is itself a working of grace. So if we are not willing to turn within, if we're not willing to try to turn within, we are obstructing the work of grace. So to the extent to which we try to turn within, we are thereby yielding ourselves to grace and allowing grace to flow through us. So it's the effort we make is absolutely essential, because that's the way in which Bhagavan's grace is working. If we say, oh, no, Bhagavan's grace, I won't do anything, Bhagavan's grace has to do everything. Bhagavan's grace is the one, it's Bhagavan's grace, but it's making us to turn within. So if we refuse to turn within, we are refusing the grace that he is offering us. So the greatest grace is to turn within and subside back into our heart. So we have to embrace that grace wholeheartedly by trying our best to turn within. And of course, we all have Vishaya Vasana, so our mind keeps on jumping outwards. But if we really have love for Bhagavan, if we really have love for his teachings, if we really have love to know and to be what we actually are, if we really want to surrender ourselves to him, we have to keep on trying. And even doesn't matter how many times we may seem to fail. As Bhagavan said, the only true sign of progress is perseverance. So long as we are trying, we are certainly making progress. Even though we may seem to be failing hopelessly, we may seem to be repeatedly distracted by other thoughts, it doesn't matter. So long as we are trying our best to turn within, even if we seem to be failing, it doesn't matter. So long as we're trying, we are making progress. Bhagavan has made that very, very clear. So he's doing his part perfectly. We have to cooperate by trying to do our little part.
There was a little message at the bottom. Let's just see if there's a comment from that person. Right. Thank you. Those who caught in the jaws of the tiger will never be forsaken. What a great assurance. Okay. Now, let's go to the...
Yes, it's really, that's those words of Bhagavan are such precious words. Whenever we feel disheartened by our own lack of love to follow this path, we should always remember those words and remember what the caution he gives us after giving us those words. We have to keep on trying. He will certainly save us, but we have to play our little part.
If we have the picture of Bhagavan sitting on a tiger skin, that would remind us.
Yes, he is the Jnana Puli, the tiger of Jnana. He has caught us in his jaws. So we can struggle, but he's not going to let go of us. So, but rather than struggling, if we don't want to experience the pain of struggling, we should yield ourselves to him. The more we yield ourselves to him, the more it will be a painless process.
Right. Lately, I've been having a very particular experience. In one hand, I dissolve in reality and perceive the infinite love more frequently, is a most wonderful gift. On the other hand, I feel a lot of hate against a particular group of people that is killing other group of people without any restriction. The thoughts that manifest are of revenge and of causing pain to these people. Any suggestions on what should I do?
As Bhagavan says, we shouldn't allow our mind to dwell too much on worldly matters. The world, what happens in the world seems to be very unjust. But ultimately, there is a power behind all these things. Nothing can happen. That is, whatever we experience is the fruit of our own past actions, but not just a random selection of the fruit of our past actions, but whatever we are allotted to experience in this life is what grace has chosen for us. So there are certain things that happen if we're caught up in a war or in a famine or a pandemic or something. It seems so many unjust things are happening. Good people are dying, innocent people are dying and everything. But because we are viewing all these things through a very limited, we are seeing from a limited perspective. But it's because of a limitation of our perspective, but we say this is good, that is bad. Ultimately, whatever is happening is for the good of all concerned. So it may seem to, how can it be good for innocent children to be killed? Who are we to know? They may be given a better life. So things that seem to us to be very bad, it's all for a purpose. So we, from our limited perspective, we cannot judge the actions of God. Not that God is actually doing anything, but everything that is happening by his merely, as Bhagavan says in the 15th paragraph of Nana, it's all happening Isan Sanidana Visesha Matrata, by the mere special nature of the presence of God. So by his being as he is, everything is happening as it should happen. So there is a justice behind everything, even though we can't see it. And even when to say justice is not quite adequate, because justice sounds like reward and punishment. The allotment of the fruit of karma is more than just reward and punishment. God gives us those fruit which will be most conducive to our spiritual development. We may not understand how, but that is the case. So if we believe in grace, if we believe in the ultimate goodness of God, the ultimate goodness of Bhagavan, nothing can be happening in this world but is not for the ultimate good of all concerned. Because what is the three defining characteristics of God? He's all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-loving. Because he's all-knowing, nothing can be happening without his knowledge. Because he's all-powerful, nothing can happen without his consent. And because he's all-loving, nothing that happens with his knowledge and with his consent can be anything but for the good of all concerned. So to our view, these wars and terrible things that are happening in the world, they seem so unjust. It seems there are good people and there are bad people. But every single one of us is a mixture of good and bad. We all have good tendencies and we have bad tendencies. So we cannot rectify the behavior of others. All we can do is rectify our own behavior by making sure that we don't allow ourselves to be swayed by the bad vasanas. So if we begin to feel hatred towards a certain group of people, we have to see both sides. For example, I think I know which conflict you're talking about. On both sides of that conflict, there are extremists. And those extremists are doing things that just make the situation worse. So the present conflict started with with something that was very, very unjust. So many innocent people were killed, murdered, raped, kidnapped, and injured, and everything. That's how it all started. And now it seems that the other side is doing all the harm, but it's on both sides the problem is there. So as Bhagavan says, however bad others may appear to be, it is not proper to dislike them. Likes and dislikes are both to be disliked. So we need to understand, but the thing is, in human conflicts, you've got two different perspectives. And from one side, each side, it seems to them that they're in the right. They feel that they've been unjustly treated and they're defending their rights. So human conflict is so complex. So let's not sit in judgment on these things. And most of all, let's not hate anyone. The whole problem, all these troubles are caused by hatred, by people allowing hatred to arise in their heart. If each and every one of us was kind and loving, these sort of conflicts wouldn't arise. But we all have asubha vasanas, as Bhagavan says. So we all have an inclination to see justice on one side, injustice on another side. There's injustice on both sides, there's justice on both sides. There's good on both sides, there's bad on both sides. This is just the nature, life. Embodied existence, samsara, is extremely complex. There's no absolute good and absolute bad. It's all a mixture of good and bad, because our vasanas are good and bad, and all ultimately is just a play of our own vasanas. So we shouldn't allow these feelings of, yes, of course we feel compassion. We feel compassion for those on both sides of any conflict who are suffering. And in any conflict, there are suffering on both sides. For example, there's another conflict going on for the last 2 years where one big country has invaded a smaller country. That's totally unjust, what has happened. But there's suffering on both sides. So many families from the big country have been bereaved by their sons being sent to this senseless war. So they're suffering on every side. So this is just the nature of embodied existence. So we cannot rectify the world. All we can do is rectify ourselves. And the way to rectify ourselves is to turn within more and more and surrender ourselves to Bhagavan, knowing that whatever happens, whatever is happening in accordance with his will, and is therefore for the ultimate good of all concerned. I hope that's an adequate answer to that question. So Bhagavan said, it's our own likes and dislikes that we need to dislike. We need to turn within and thereby give up all our own likes and dislikes. Why do we...
Michael.
Yes.
Sorry, sorry for interrupting you. It was my question, and what happens is that it's not something I can control. It's like the hatred just manifests itself, and what I usually do is just giving it space so that it has all its power out of it, so that it just goes away. I don't know if that's
I understand what you mean.
Correct thing.
That is this love and hatred for external things. These are the play of our own vasanas. So we need to try to we need to try to curb our vasanas. Often we fail, often we get carried away by the vasanas, but our aim is to curb the vasanas, not to allow ourselves to be swayed by the vasanas. The most effective way is to try more and more to turn within. Another way is to try to see things from a broader perspective, to see that there's actually injustice in any conflict, there's injustice on both sides. There's good and bad. Okay, some wars you can say, okay, there's one country is an aggressor, the other country didn't do anything to provoke it. But in many conflicts, there's bad on both sides. As I say, there are extremists on both sides. These extremists are what cause the problem. And ultimately, most people just want to live a quiet and peaceful life. But the circumstances create all these things. And so we have to be very, very vigilant when these feelings of hatred arise in our heart. We may not be able to stop them arising, but we shouldn't feed them. We should try, and best way to defuse them is by trying to turn within more and more. When we're not able to defuse them, when we're not able to turn within, we should try to think thoughts in such a way to calm down that hatred, to see that there are problems on both sides, to see that this is the very nature of embodied existence. See nature, how many conflicts there are in nature. Nature is a struggle for survival. So many different species of plants and animals, all are struggling for survival. Even in the plant kingdom, there's a struggle for survival. Some get the upper hand and may survive, and others die. This is just the nature of embodied existence. We can't get away from this so long as we rise as ego and thereby assume this embodiment for ourselves. So we have to give up our own embodiment. And the way to give up our own embodiment means our own identification with the body is to turn within. So ultimately, even people who do very bad things, we need to understand all bad things are done in ignorance. It is only because people's minds are clouded by a thick fog of very strong vasanas, but they cannot see things clearly, and that they choose to do bad actions. They choose to do actions that cause harm to other people. So we have to feel compassionate for them, but even for the most wicked people, that they are acting because of their own ignorance in such a way. So we need to try to transmute that hatred into love, because hatred is never a solution for hatred. The only solution for hatred is love.
Thank you, Michael.
Ultimately, it is the same eye shining in the heart of everyone. But what distinguishes one person's behavior from another person's behavior is the type of vasanas they are allowing themselves to be swayed by, as Bhagavan says. So we have to see beyond all these external things. See, if we see that light of pure awareness shining in our own heart, then only will we see that same light is shining in the heart of everyone. And then only will we have universal compassion. Then only will we truly be able to love our neighbor as ourselves. So long as we see our neighbor as other, we cannot love them as ourselves. In order to love our neighbor as ourselves, we have to see them as ourselves. And we can see them as ourselves only by seeing ourselves as we actually are. This is not easy. We all have strong vasanas that pull our mind outwards in so many ways. But this is what this spiritual path is all about. Recognizing that the root of all problems lies within ourselves. And ultimately, we have to solve the problem within ourselves before we can hope to solve any other problem.
And sometimes inner, deeper experiences bring to the surface vasanas that are buried also.
Yes. And as Bhagavan said, all these vasanas have to come to the surface of the mind, because until they come to the surface of the mind, we can't get rid of them. But how do we get rid of them? By not allowing ourselves to be swayed by them. So the vasanas rise, the feelings of hatred arise. We shouldn't allow ourselves to be swayed by them. That is, vasanas have no strength of their own. Whatever strength vasanas seem to have is strength that they derive from us. And vasanas derive strength from us to the extent to which we allow ourselves to be swayed by them. So the more we allow ourselves to be swayed by the feelings of hatred, the stronger those feelings of hatred will become. So it's our responsibility. Let the vasanas rise. We shouldn't be swayed by them. So we shouldn't succumb to the feelings of hatred but are arising in our heart. We shouldn't entertain those feelings. We should turn our attention back within, or if we're not able to turn our attention back within, we should find some other way of diffusing those feelings.
There's a comment here which has come much later, but it relates to what you're just saying. So I guess we better pop it in.
Yeah.
Are you sure that Israeli-Palestine started with the attack on October the 7th, 2023?
No, of course it didn't.
It started in 1948, maybe even 19...
It has been going on for hundreds of years. For everything that happens in this world, there's a long, long history. But certain things, certain events trigger certain other events. So this is, there's injustice everywhere in the world. There's sufferers of injustice. So life is too complicated to, and we can't say one set of people are good and one set of people are bad. It's just not like that. But life is, we can't say any one individual is good or bad. We all have good in us, we all have bad in us. But it's up to us whether we allow ourselves to be swayed by the good vasanas, the subha vasanas, or the asubha vasanas. So that's why Bhagavan is not much, Bhagavan didn't say a lot about how we should behave in this world, because Bhagavan is going to the very root. The very root of all problems is ego. And the first, as soon as we rise as ego, we come under the sway of vasanas. So it's the vasanas are the seeds that give rise to the thoughts, and in turn give rise to all the other actions. So it's at the level of vasanas Bhagavan wants us to deal with these things. So Bhagavan doesn't want us to allow ourselves to be swayed by these vasanas.
He even made a comment to Paramahamsa Yogananda, who wanted to change the world.
Yes.
Even him.
Yeah.
Right. So
we are not here to change the world. So many divine incarnations are there. Krishna has come, Rama came, Jesus came, so many divine incarnations. Still the world goes on the same. So if even this should teach us, but we are not here to rectify the world. We are here to rectify ourselves. If we can rectify ourselves, if we rectify ourselves, at least we're not contributing to all the bad things in the world. That's the most we can do. And ultimately, as Bhagavan says, all this is a dream. This dream appears because we have risen as ego. So if we really want to put an end to all these wars, all these famines, all these pandemics, all old age, disease, all the inevitable sufferings of embodied existence, all we need to do is to turn within and to subside back into our own heart.
in fact, Buddha even said, try and find any household where there is not some sort of a disaster.
Yes. Find any family where there's not some sort of conflict. When there's conflict within families, what is the wonder that there's conflict between different different groups of people and different countries and so on. Not only within families, there's conflicts within our own mind. Our vasanas are pulling us in different directions. So conflict is the nature of manifest existence. If we rise as ego, we are caught up in conflict. If not external conflict, we have to deal with the internal conflict. That's why Bhagavan said this whole spiritual path is nothing but a battle fought within our own will. And Bhagavan said all these Puranic stories that tell us about the battle between the Devas and the Asuras, the good forces and the bad forces, this is nothing but the battle going on within our own heart between the good vasanas and the bad vasanas. Good vasanas and bad vasanas superficially means the subha vasanas and the asubha vasanas. But ultimately, even the so-called subha vasanas, they're all Vishaya vasanas. Ultimately, the only good vasana, the only perfectly good vasana is Sat vasana. So that this is the battle, this is the warfare of grace that Bhagavan refers to in Aksharamlai when he sings, Hokum Varavumil Poduveli Inilaro Pora Tankataranachala. Show me the warfare of grace fought in the common space where there's no going and coming. The common space where there's no going and coming is our own heart. The warfare of grace is this battle fought between Satvasana, which is the manifestation of grace in our heart, and all the Vishaya vasanas. And this warfare, the outcome of this war is certain. That is, grace is going to win this war. But we need to yield ourselves to that grace by trying to turn within. The more we rush outward, the more we are opposing the grace. We're fighting on the wrong side. So if we want to be on the side of grace, we need to turn within and surrender ourselves completely.
I've learned self is simultaneously internal and external. And then he says, it seems when the attempt is made to turn attention within, the question comes, is this only mind?
To say self is internal and external, that is internal and external. Firstly, they're relative terms. What is internal from one perspective is external from another perspective. In terms of ātma-vicāra, what is inside means what is in the heart. The heart means the center. When Bhagavan talks about the heart, we alone are the heart. Whatever is in the heart is only the heart, because if there was something other than the heart in the heart, that other thing would be the heart of the heart. So the heart means that which is centermost. What is centermost is our own being. So when Bhagavan talks about, in the context of ātma-vicāra, within means ourself alone. Everything else is external. So that's why Bhagavan defines turning within as attending to ourself alone. So long as we see multiplicity, we are not seeing ourself in all, because we ourselves are one. So long as we see many, we are not seeing one. What we are seeing as many is one. But so long as we're seeing it as many, we're not seeing it as one. So in order to see everything as ourself, we need to see ourselves as what we actually are. When we see what we actually are, then we will find there's nothing other than ourself. So to say self is inside and outside is not a very helpful thing, because so long as we see that distinction between inside and outside, we are not seeing ourselves as we actually are. When we see ourselves as we actually are, both inside and outside will dissolve and we alone will remain. That was one part of it. And what was the second part? There was another part.
It seems when the attempt is made to turn attention within, the question comes, is this only mind?
It's not a matter of we're trying to go beyond I and mine. We're trying to see what we actually are. So the more we turn within, the more we see ourselves as we actually are, the more we'll see that what we actually are is what alone exists. As Bhagavan says in the 7th paragraph of Nana, Yatatamai Ulladu ātma-sarupam. That means what actually exists is only ātma-sarupa. Ātma-sarupa means the real nature of ourself. In other words, ourself as we actually are. So what we actually are is what alone actually exists. So it's not mine, not yours. I mean, so long as you've got I and you, mine and yours, we're seeing in terms of duality. We're still looking outwards. When we look within, there is nothing other than I. If we are really looking within. So long as we see anything other than I, we're not yet looking within deep enough.
Okay, the next one actually comes from iPhone, strangely enough.
Okay.
iPhone.
Right.
You have said to dwell on Bhagavan's teachings when the mind is too tired to do self-inquiry. Can we do other meditative practices instead of thinking about the teachings as a form of rest? And how do we know our mind is rested enough to return back to self-inquiry?
It's not so much a matter of rest. The problem is why we find difficulty turning within is due to inadequacy of our love. So it's not a matter of so much of tiredness. It's a matter of we don't yet have enough liking to turn within. So we try to turn within because of our liking to jump outwards. After some time, there seems to be a conflict between our liking to turn outwards and the little liking we have to turn within. So we seem to get tired. But we take a break, not just to recover from the tiredness. We take a break in order to re-enthuse ourselves, become enthusiastic again to turn within. Obviously, meditating on Bhagavan's teachings is the greatest, is the best way to encourage us to turn within. But if we find any other practices, maybe just mentally chanting Bhagavan's name, for example, if that re-enthuses us to turn within, then that is good. Whatever gives us that restores our enthusiasm to keep on trying to turn within is good. We each have to decide for ourselves what is most effective. But in my experience, I feel that thinking about Bhagavan's teachings, because Bhagavan is constantly digging into us, that if we understand Bhagavan's teachings correctly, all his teachings are in so many ways impressing upon us the need for us to turn within, to attend to ourselves. So the more we think of his teaching, the more we are encouraged to turn within. But if there's anything, meditating on Bhagavan's name, meditating on Bhagavan's form, thinking of Arunachal, all these things can help us. So whatever we find most effective, but the crucial thing is, whatever we do, nothing is a substitute for turning within. So when we don't have sufficient enthusiasm to turn within, we should try to do both things, but we'll rekindle that enthusiasm.